I like that comment because it goes right into this next one. Why do we need it, right? Well, I mean, if you're not convinced by the last slide, let's dig a little deeper, right?
No, I'm convinced, but yeah, still continue.
We need it because we need to streamline and focus our internal processes and procedures and the people and the resources, right? How do we really socialize a plan? How do we really understand what we're doing makes sense and has value, right?
Yeah.
So what we need product development as a process because it helps us really map out how our product will give a solution to a customer, right? At the end of the day, your idea is worth nothing unless it actually meets a customer need, right?
Yes, exactly.
And what's interesting as well is it also is not a firm plan, meaning it doesn't have to be it's not unchangeable. You can change your ideas, you can adjust your ideas. It's not trying to put a process together that says you shall not change it, you can't change your mind, but rather understanding what those changes do to your plan and how they affect them. So between hardware and software companies, it's slightly different in how they approach things, because very simply, if you listen to Eric Ries, who wrote the information behind the lean startup approach, he creates the loop on the right, which is called the build, measure, learn loop, right? So traditionally, how he thinks software should be developed is you have an idea, you build it, you form a product out of it, you measure that product with the people, you get the data, you learn from how it's working, and you go back and revisit the idea, and you continuously have this circle of learning, right, that goes on.
It's like a circle.
Exactly. And in hardware, it's slightly different. You don't necessarily have the ability to go back and learn and complete that circle, because hardware takes a lot of effort up front, and then you have to make a lot of them. And if you're trying to change your mind right in the process of making a lot of them, it's going to cost a lot of money and it's going to be a lot of issues,
yes,
right? So
it's not so easy.
Yeah, so hardware is rooted in something that's a bit older in methodology and thought process, which is, okay, let's make sure that we understand what the customer wants, how we spell those out so we can design those things, and then how we do the work, and then how we check that the work's been done, and then give it to the customer. Because if we're wrong, we just lost a whole lot of money and time, and that's something
and the
we have
customers, if you don't do it like at his, you
100%.
lost it.
Yeah, you lose everything. So that's why it's so strict on being able to map out your journey. So a couple of examples to bring it home here. I don't know if you have a pop socket. I feel like everybody has a pop socket on the back of their phone these days, right?
I have one, but I broke up.
Yeah,
it fell down and it broke.
You have to get another one. They're pretty cheap. And the nice thing about it is, what I really like is it was created by a professor, and he said, you know what, I need something to hold my phone and put it on the surface, right? Because my finger, when I hold my big phone, my finger is getting tired of holding my phone. So, you have what I have here, you have a clip, right, that holds your phone up, but he created a pop socket to do that primarily, and also to set it on your table. So if you're watching a video, you can look at it. And so that was a good idea. It was very simple, and he didn't have to put a whole lot of process into it. He said, let's just make these things. But he got to a point where now competition came in and said, hey, we can also make those things, or make them similar to those, like what I have in my case, for example. So what he did is he said, you know what would take me to the next level? And he realized that pop socket is real estate. It's marketing real estate. It's a small billboard, right? It's a small advertisement. And so he started connecting with other companies and saying, what if we could give you pop sockets and actually have your logo or your information on them? And that changed his whole business model, really, because now he wasn't so focused on the hardware, but the advertising revenue that he was getting from the hardware. And so by 2018, that change of philosophy using good product development processes allowed him to grow the company, and it became $200 million by 2018 for these little things that you see on the screen. It's ridiculous, right? So that's a good example. Now, a bad example, or a poor, I wouldn't say bad. Kodak is still a very important company across the world. In the 80s and 90s, they had a huge market share, 90% of the market across the world. They were everywhere. They helped invent the digital camera. And then they went through market research in the 80s and said, hey, what do we think about the digital camera? How do we think people are going to react to it? And the marketing firm that they talked with said, we think people are going to love digital film, digital cameras. And Kodak said, we're not so sure. We're going to keep making film. And so they chose to ignore the market feedback, which is the first no-no of product development process. Is you have to understand what your customer wants and map that out, right? So in the 90s and the 80s and 90s, they started getting, a lot of competition coming in that ended up taking in, digital-based competitors came in and just started taking a foothold. And so because they ignored digital by about 2020 or 2012, they filed Chapter 11. They went bankrupt. They still exist today, but they're just a shell of what they were when they were, when they ruled the world back in the 80s and 90s. So
you're in the process.
Yep. And this is valuable feedback for us because we don't want to be a Kodak. We want to be a pop socket, right?